The case study, data collection. Let's discuss data collection in the case study methodology. We know that a case study is an in-depth analysis of a bounded system or phenomenon, and that the case study is a qualitative research method. The case study is where the subject of the research is studied within its own context, and case studies are real. They offer a chance to get a snapshot of real life, a rich and thick picture of a phenomenon. Yen points out that case studies are the preferred strategy of how and why questions. They offer the qualitative approach to research using words as data, and the researcher is the primary instrument for data collection and analysis. Words, rather than numbers, are used to convey what the researcher has learned about a bounded system or a phenomenon. So here's data according to Dilbert. Now, instead of making up data, we are going to collect data, and let's focus on data. Think about your research question. What type of data will you need to prove or support your research question? Thinking about the data now will help you perfect that research question. Be sure your research question is narrow enough. Be sure it's a how or why question, which is the most appropriate for a case study. The work that you invest now on your research question will save you time during your research. Now, the case study is a qualitative tool, and data collection tools for qualitative research include a direct observation, so watching human interactions or a physical environment. Interviews, so an open-ended conversation with a key participant. Archival records, employee records, organizational charts, maps, survey data. Documents, newspaper articles, letters, emails, reports, court reports, website data, job descriptions. Participant observation, being a part of a real-life role in a scene you're studying. Physical artifacts, computer downloads of employees' work. And ideally, you will find two sources of data so you can cross-reference the results. Let's look at these a little bit closer. So documentation. You might be able to look at letters, memos, policies within an organization, maybe personnel policy, agendas from important meetings, and perhaps technology meeting minutes, maybe job descriptions. What do the security personnel job descriptions all look like? Do they all mention information governance, for example? Web pages, and then archival records, service records, maps, lists, personnel records, organizational charts. Where do certain people fall on organizational charts within organizations? Survey data, previously collected surveys. And then interviews. Who do you interview? Do you interview CIOs or members of a technology team or university students or university professors? And then when you interview them, are you just guiding the conversation? Or do you ask them open-ended questions? Or you give them a survey, but the survey does only consist of open-ended questions, because remember, this is qualitative. Or you could have a focus group, a group of several individuals, and you are having an open conversation, an open discussion with several individuals at one time. Observation, you are watching people do their work, either formally or casually. And then artifacts, you look at works of art, you look at instruments, you look at a computer or you look at a medical device, some type of technology. Now let's look at a few of these tools a bit closer, a few of these tools that are most popular in the type of case study that you may be doing. You can use any of these tools that you like, and you feel free to do the research on your own, but I want to pull out a couple of these. I'm going to look at documentation a little bit closer. Existing records often will provide you with insight into a setting or a group of people that can't really be observed or noted in another way. It can be found in document form, any written or recorded material not prepared for the purpose of evaluation or at the request of the inquirer. Documents can be public records or personal documents. Public records are materials created and kept for the purpose of attesting to a phenomenon or providing an accounting. Public records can be collected from an outside external source or within an organization, an internal source. So external records are like census records, vital statistic reports, county office records, newspaper archives, and local business records. Internal records, let's think about a university as an example. It might be something like student transcripts, historical accounts, mission statements, annual reports, budgets, standardized testing at a university or at a school would be good examples within a school system. Grade reports, some type of summary of grades in that example. Meetings of minutes, internal memos, policy manuals, institutional histories, college university catalogs is a good example for a university. Faculty handbooks, student handbooks, official correspondence, and many universities are public institutions, so they do keep those. They're again back to web pages. Web pages will tend to have a student handbook, a faculty handbook, a fact book. Demographic materials. Demographics are a great source. And also back to public materials, the census has a lot of demographic information. Mass media reports, presentations, program development, program evaluation. These things are particularly useful in describing institutional characteristics such as background, performance of students. It helps identify institutional strengths and weaknesses. It helps you identify an institution's resource, values, processes, priorities, concerns, and they provide a record or history, and it's not subject to bias. So that's a good example for a university. Now, if you're looking at more for individuals, personal documents can be first-person accounts of events and experience, documents of life, diaries, portfolios, photographs, artwork, schedules, scrapbooks, poetry, letters. So collecting data from documents is relatively invisible to and requires minimal cooperations from people. These are the more public types of information. And the usefulness of existing sources varies depending on whether they are accessible and accurate. So when you use such types of instruments, do a quick scan to assess the data, evaluate the quality before you do an extensive analysis. So the advantage of using documentation is that it's usually readily available, it's inexpensive, it's grounded in setting and language in which they occur. It's useful in determining value, interest, positions, political climate, public attitudes. It can provide information on historical trends and sequences. And usually it can provide opportunity for studying trends over time. And it's unobtrusive. You don't have to interrupt someone or set a meeting to take an hour out of their time. The disadvantages are that it is what it is. It may be incomplete. It may be inaccurate. The authenticity may be questionable. Locating the right documents may pose challenges. It may be incomplete. And the analysis may be time-consuming and access could be difficult. You may have an incomplete set of documents and that may be all that's available. but those are limitations you must just simply state in your case study. Now, the interview. Interviews can be used, and an in-depth interview are especially useful in answering particular questions. What does the phenomenon look and feel like to those involved? What do stakeholders know about the phenomenon? What thoughts do the stakeholders know about the phenomenon? How do they feel about the phenomenon? What are their expectations? What changes do the participants perceive in themselves as a result of their environment in the phenomenon? These are really rich details that can only be expressed by actually talking to those involved. Specific circumstances for which in-depth interviews are particularly appropriate include situations involving complex subject matter, detailed information, high-status respondents, and highly sensitive subject matter. Interviews usually yield the richest data, detail, and new insights. It permits face-to-face contact with respondents. It provides opportunity to explore topics in depth. If your interviewee mentions something that's particularly interesting, you can stop and explore that piece even deeper. It allows the interviewer to experience the affect as well as cognitive aspects of responses. The interviewer can explain or clarify questions, increasing the likelihood of useful responses. You can be flexible in administering interview to particular individuals or in particular circumstances, so it allows flexibility. But there are disadvantages. It's time consuming. You need to be prepared. You need to know how you're going to interview people. The interviewee may have difficulty remembering things. They may be wanting to please you, so they may slightly distort their stories. Flexibility can result in inconsistency across the interviews, and the volume of information that you get may be very large, so it can be difficult and time-consuming to transcribe it and to take that data into something meaningful that you can use. And then who will you interview? Who would be your sample population? Would it be people who work in a certain field, security people, network people, CIOs, anyone in a technology department, for example? Would it be members of a Facebook group? Would it be university students? Who are those people that can really answer your particular research question to give you that information that you need? Now, the focus group is similar to the interview. It combines the elements of both interviewing and participant observation. It is an interview. It's not a discussion group. It's not a problem-solving group or a decision-making group. However, it does capitalize on some of those features. It is group dynamics. It's the use of group interaction to generate data, generate insights. It allows the observation of group dynamics, group discussion, firsthand insights, and you can look at behavior, attitudes, and languages of your participants. Focus groups are a gathering of individuals who share some characteristics relevant to your evaluation. It was originally used as a market research tool to investigate the appeal of products. The focus group technique has been adopted by other fields, such as education, as a tool for data gathering on a given topic. Initially, focus groups took place in a special facility that included a recording apparatus, such as audio and visual, and an attached room with a one-way mirror for observation. There was an official recorder, and participants were paid for attendance and provided with snacks, and the focus group technique has been adopted by fields outside of marketing. And some of them included payment and refreshments, but most of that's been eliminated now. So focus groups can be used for formative and summative stages of an evaluation. They provide answers to some of the same types of questions as an in-depth interview, except they take place in more of a social context. They can help identify and define problems during a phenomenon's implementation. They can provide pre-testing of topics and ideas. They can identify project strengths, weaknesses, and recommendations. They can help you obtain perceptions of the phenomenon's outcomes and impacts. They're very good at brainstorming and generating new ideas. And focus groups contain several individuals. They encourage discussion and free-flowing ideas. Observations. These are methods by which an individual or individuals gather first-hand data on phenomenons. They provide the evaluators, you, with an opportunity to collect data on a wide range of behaviors. You can capture a great variety of interactions and explore your topic. You directly observe operations. You directly observe activities. It helps you understand the context within which the project operates. It's especially important when it's not the event that's of interest, but how that event may fit into a sequent event. It can be useful during formative and summative phases. For example, observations can be useful in determining whether or not the project is being delivered and operated as planned. It also can be helpful to determine whether or not the project has been successful. The advantages is it provides you with direct information about the behavior of individuals or groups. It's a good opportunity for identifying unanticipated outcomes. So you might be able to see a direct problem. It's a natural, unstructured, flexible setting. The disadvantages, it's time consuming. You need to be highly prepared. You need to spend a great deal of time. And you just sit there and watch what happens. Now, there are many more techniques other than these that I pulled out. Feel free to research them on your own and find which data collection techniques fit your project, your research question the best. Create a case study database early to store and organize the data that you find. Organize the data that you find and collect and maintain a chain of evidence. Where did you find the data and who found the data? Then, as you progress, who collected it? When was it collected? How was it collected? Depending upon the type of data collection, you may need to record, transcribe data. Make sure you keep it organized. Add notes and narrative to remember how you thought you might use the data. And as your data collection plan becomes more concrete, your database and file will as well. It will become more and more organized as you progress through your research paper. You will also need to consider bias, reliability, validity, and credibility as you progress through your research paper. Bias is presenting only one side of the story or what someone has to gain in a case. This can occur from a news story you might find as a reference. It can also occur when you gather your data for your research. Is it fair? Do thorough research. Look for alternative views when conducting research. Look for omissions and gaps in your research. Be sure your interview questions are not biased. Be sure your sample is not biased. Reliability. Aim for consistent results. If you repeated your research, would you get the same results? Are your results similar to other surveys? Triangulate your results by using two types of data collection. Both of your types of data collection should yield similar results, consistent results. Validity. Is the data accurate? Are you asking the right questions in the right way? Be sure your questions are written in the right way. Does the data directly relate to your research question? And who are you asking questions of? Be sure that you're asking an expert. Be sure your sample population is a trustworthy source. Be sure that your references are quality references and those people that you are interviewing or observing or the documentation you're reviewing are trustworthy. Now we know that research is about gathering perspectives, gathering quality research, and supporting your paper with references. Here's another perspective for you on validity, bias, and reliability.
This video is about validity in qualitative research. Remembering that validity is the ability to measure exactly what you're saying you're measuring. So proving that you are indeed getting results because you're measuring something very specific, your specific phenomenon. And so one of the potential threats to being able to prove that you are measuring what you say you're measuring is researcher bias. Researcher bias is when a researcher has their perspective, their background, or pieces of their thinking that are coming into the results and are influencing the results. So you have to be able to show that you've done everything you can as a researcher to reduce your researcher bias. And there's a couple of ways of doing this. You could use reflexivity, which is constantly thinking about what your potential biases are and how you can minimize those biases, and also being able to give that information to your reader, that you understand that you have these potential biases because of your perspective and because of your background, but here's what was done to make sure that you were reducing the researcher bias. You also could do a negative case sampling. So you're finding, or you're attempting to find, a case or some research that disproves your hypothesis or disproves your results, and you're including that within your research results to show that although this case got this information, here's what our results say and how it stands true. So it's minimizing that researcher bias because you're bringing in this alternative perspective. There's a couple of different validity ideas in qualitative research: descriptive validity, interpretive validity, theoretical validity, and all of these kind of are encompassed in trustworthiness. Descriptive validity is one way to be able to have evidence of validity in your qualitative research. So this is being able to show that what the researcher collected and what they saw was accurate and it was factual. And a very useful way of being able to have evidence of descriptive validity is to have multiple investigators. So if you have multiple people, multiple perspectives looking at this same situation or this same phenomenon, and they're still coming up with the same themes and the same overall results, then that's giving you this descriptive validity. And then making sure that you're putting all of these descriptive details into your reporting of the results so the readers can take that in and see that you have given them all of these descriptive details where they now can have more faith that what you're reporting is actual and is factual. Interpretive validity is another way of gathering evidence to prove you have validity in your qualitative research. And so interpretive validity is how accurate was the depiction that was given from the participants. So if you are interviewing participants, how accurate were the results that you gave out to your reader? Did it truly portray their viewpoints and the meaning of their words and really what they were thinking and feeling? And some ways to be able to show that you've taken interpretive validity into account is member checking, which is participant feedback. So it's going back and letting the participant look at what you wrote and say, yes, this is what I meant, or no, this needs to be changed because it's not what I meant. This is misrepresentation. Another way is to have low inference in descriptors. So your descriptions that you give in your results are very close to what participants actually said and to the actual field notes that the researcher had. You're not putting too much extra description in there to add meaning to what was given. It's exactly what was said and exactly what was seen. Theoretical validity is also another place where you can get evidence to prove that you have validity in your qualitative research. And theoretical validity is, does the interpretation and results that the researcher has given fit the data that was collected? And there's 4 strategies for theoretical validity. There's this extended field work. So going out and making sure that you are collecting data in the field for an extended period of time. So making sure that you didn't miss anything, having more than enough data. Then there's also this use of multiple theories and perspectives. So being able to have multiple ways of looking at your data and interpreting and understanding it, and if you come to the same results, then that's very important. Then you can have pattern matching. So this is looking at unique or complex predictions and seeing if they occur. So seeing if the unusual or unexpected is happening within your data. Really look for it to make sure that you're not missing it. Also have peer review, have a critical friend, have somebody else, a peer or a colleague, review your data and also your results and make sure that it's matching. And then you go and you give this information to your reader so that they can know that you've done everything you can to prove that you have validity within your qualitative research. So all 3 of these ways of gathering this evidence of validity for your qualitative research and being able to talk about your researcher bias or potential researcher bias all build up to trustworthiness. So trustworthiness is really the validity that is being looked for in qualitative research. And all of these different parts and pieces come together to get the reader to trust the researcher and their results.
So where do you go from here? Consider data collection and continue to perfect your research question. Is it a how or why question? Is it narrow enough? Do you consider a sample population in your question? Continue working on your research question because the time you invest now will continue to pay off throughout your research paper.